Good morning. I'm glad you've tuned in. I have a very interesting guest. It's Pastor Laverne March of the Living Waters Ministry here in St. Augustine. Good morning, Pastor.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
The pleasure is mine. Tell me about you. Before we launch, for the few people listening who might not be too well acquainted with you, tell me about your background. Where did you grow up, and how did you end up being pastor at Living Waters Ministry here in the ancient city?
So I was born and raised here in St. Augustine, Florida. I was raised in West Augustine. I went to St. Augustine High, graduated from St. Augustine High in 1981. I went to college on a softball scholarship, right, in 1981 to Florida A&M University. And to study, I originally started out studying psychology. I matriculated, but I didn't finish there. I came back home and started working at the St. Johns County Courthouse, and then later on went on to finish my degree. While I was working, I actually found a job at a logistics engineering firm, and that job caused me to work in Washington, D.C. They would fly me back and forth. One of the contracts that we had in that firm was actually for Congress, right, when they were doing the airports during that 9/11 time and all of that. We got one of those contracts, and I was working there. Enjoyed working in the Virginia area. Northern Virginia. Our headquarters was in McLean, Virginia, and so I was having a great time. I thought the mindsets of the people were progressive. I just really was enjoying myself and really wanted to permanently relocate there. And I felt like I sensed the Spirit of God telling me that one day I was preparing to go to work at headquarters. And I remember hearing the Lord speak to my heart and saying that you've got 2 weeks to get back home in St. Augustine. It is there where I have called you to work. And I go, oh, for real, God? And so I came back to St. Augustine. I went to church at St. Paul AME. I was born and raised in that church here on Martin Luther King Avenue. And so I was born and raised there, but God spoke to my heart again about doing ministry in a different way, leading a congregation. And so I ended up founding Living Waters Ministries with just a Bible study. A few of us started a Bible study, and it grew into a church. And when I came back here, I've always had a heart. When I was growing up in school, grade school, I could remember anyone that was sitting by themselves in the cafeteria, I would take my plate and go sit by them. The new kid that came to school, I always felt so bad about the new kid being by themselves, and I would try to strike up conversations. And I always felt like if somebody had someone to listen to, life would get better for them. Or why isn't somebody helping this kid, and why isn't somebody sitting with that kid? That kind of thing never left my heart as I became an adult. Why isn't someone doing something about these things, right? And when I came back here, I would ask the question, why isn't someone doing something about this? Why isn't someone doing something about that? And every time I asked that question and I went into prayer, I felt like God was speaking to my heart about, why don't you become the change that you want to see? So that's how I got so involved in ministry outreach. I love outreach probably more than inreach, right? And so that's how I got started. But I actually love St. Augustine, Florida, born here, West Augustine. Now I bought a house downtown St. Augustine and have been here and enjoy, of course, all of the beaches and I love St. Augustine, Florida. And while I go other places to visit, I go up to the mountains and all of the things. St. Augustine has been home for me. I have raised my 2 children here. I have a daughter. My one son, he passed away, is no longer with us. But my daughter, she's here, and she's a nurse. She was a nurse at Flagler Hospital. So I have my daughter and my husband and I are married to Richard March, and together we have 5 children and I believe we have about 10 grandchildren together, right? And so we enjoy just life here in St. Augustine, working here in St. Augustine, and making life better here in St. Augustine, Florida.
You strike me as somebody who was raised by people with very strong morals, very principled people with strong ethics.
So, yes, although my parents growing up weren't religious in nature, they were principled people, and they taught me, my mom and my dad taught me all of my values. Hard work, doing to others as you want them to do unto you. Mother big on not cheating. No, you don't have to do that. My mother instilled in me work really hard. I saw her coming home after a hard day's work. She played sports like I did. We would go and watch her play City League basketball, right? But after work, I could remember watching her come home from a hard day's work, go right in the kitchen, start cooking, do the clothes. I watch her believe in herself. I don't remember seeing my mother as much as she went through. I don't remember seeing her complain a whole lot. I don't remember seeing her having a defeatist attitude. My dad used to I used to sit in my dad's lap. My dad loved music, loved jazz. Mother loved soul music. Daddy loved jazz, classical, all of the things. And I could remember as a 3-year-old, my earliest remembrance of my daddy, he's gone now, but my earliest remembrance of my dad was at about 3 years old. I could remember he was trying to teach me how to write my name. And I could remember I could get all of the letters right except the E's. And I could remember Daddy saying, "You got this, baby girl. You can do anything you put your mind to do. Baby girl, you could be the president of the United States. Don't let nobody tell you because you're a girl or because you this and that you can't do this or you can't do that. If you try hard enough, baby girl, you could accomplish anything you want to accomplish." And that as a 3-year-old girl, I could remember and said, "Daddy, you're saying that because you're just crazy about me. I'm your baby girl," right? And he said, "No, it's really the truth. You're really smart like that." And it's that kind of thing that he instilled in me. Don't let nobody tell you what you can't do. So when things became hard in ministry, and of course being a girl in ministry and all of that kind of thing, it became hard. I always hear my dad's voice saying, "Baby girl, don't let nobody tell you this. You're really smart. You really could be anything you put your mind to doing." So yeah, I just saw in them just a lot of hard work, ethics, not cheating, not trying to do this and that to get ahead, but if you put your head down and you work hard, and those have been all of the things that I remember. A strong family. We actually sat around the table to eat. There were 8 of us, 8 children and 2 parents. So there were 10 kids, 10 of us in a household. We had a 3-bedroom, 1 bath, right? And dinner times, we sat at the table together every single night, eating dinner and talking about what the day was like. And the children, we learned how to barter then. Okay, if you don't want your rice, because, times were a little tight then. And so my brother, I believe, used to sell soda bottles, right, and get money. And then sometimes he would buy a soda because my mom cooked and my dad cooked. My dad would cook on the weekends. My mom cooked during the week, right? And so we generally didn't have tea or soda, so we would barter. Okay, if I give you my rice, if you give me your soda, then I tell you what, we can do that. So I learned how to barter, learned how to get along because I had such a large family. So I learned about different personalities. Of course, I wasn't spoiled because we had to share in all of the things, right? So, yeah, it was a fun time growing up. We didn't know we didn't have a lot because we had parents that we always working hard. They always made a way. We always had clothes. We just had a good time. We grew up in a neighborhood where all of the kids would come out to play, and we would have a great time. And when the street light came on, we knew it was time to come in. And we had to do chores and homework and all of the things. So, yeah, it is definitely, I would attribute my parents, and I had aunties and uncles and all of those, my family. It was a village that had a part in raising me and the values that I have now.
So if you were brought up in a household particularly religious, how did you come to be a pastor?
So, yeah, that's interesting. As I said, it takes a village. My grandmother was in the church at St. Paul AME Church, and my grandmother would fix me a big meal on Tuesdays to catch the Overtown bus instead of going home. To catch the Overtown bus on Tuesdays to go to the YPD, we called it, the Young People's Meeting. And I can remember God touching my heart at an early age, and I can remember being a little girl begging my mother once I found out, because we would go to church on Easter. Grandma would make sure we would be on Easter, but I wanted to go more. As a little girl, I begged my mommy. I would get the brush and say, Mommy, if you just brush my hair, I could put on my own clothes. When the Sunday school bus comes around, Mommy, could I please go to church? I like church. I don't understand nothing they're saying, but I think the pastor keeps saying God is talking, so I want to be there. And I didn't understand. And so the Sunday school bus would come, and we had someone, Bernice Henry was the youth leader at that time. And she took so much time out with us, right? Miss Scott. They're all gone. On Thursdays, they would come and pick us up and have talks about life with us, right? But yeah, just from a young girl, seeing my grandmother go to church and stuff like that. And my grandmother, when I would go over to her house, she would have in the bathroom, she would have a daily bread. And I can remember picking those up when I was washing my face or washing my hands. Before I did that, I would just look at the daily bread, and Grandma used to pray for us, and my grandmama used to make sure that we got to church, and she would talk to us. And I had another auntie in Sanford, Florida, that when we would go visit on vacation, our cousins in Sanford, that it was mandatory in their house that they went to church, right? My uncle went to this Baptist church. My auntie went to AME church, and we got to choose which one. And it was mandatory, and I can remember thinking, this is the life right here. You got the parents and everybody go to church together, right? And so that's how I ended up coming to the church. And probably around the time I was 14 or 15, I was voted in at that time to be the state youth leader for the AME church and stuff. And so yeah, I went to college, graduated, kind of walked away, of course, during the college years, and then came right back to going to church and stuff. Yeah.
What a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that. You're listening to Good Morning St. Augustine. I'm your host, Liz Ryan, chatting this morning with Pastor Laverne March of the Living Waters Ministry Church. Where is the church located?
The church is located here in St. Augustine off of State Road 16 on Prunier Road, 1855 Prunier Road. So, yeah, to what I was saying, and I believe that's why I have a heart now. There will be, I know as I have pastored, one of the things that have been heavy in my ministry has been young people, because I never forgot that had it not been for someone else coming to pick me up to church. Someone else, although my parents gave me, my God, everything I needed in life, but it was someone else that took out time with me for my spiritual journey. I never forgot that. And so that's why when folk in my church would say, well, why are you spending this money on these kids that can't, when we would have camps, God put on my heart to do a camp one of the years, a full day summer camp, and stuff. But I knew those kids didn't have money, and they couldn't pay for those camps. And I kept thinking I wouldn't be a pastor today if somebody didn't pay my way, somebody didn't come pick me up, and somebody didn't invest in time in me. There's no way I would be where I am. So, I would get I would get flack sometimes from my the board and all of this kind of stuff, but it never left my heart to people that are hurting, that they could become what I am if someone just invest in them, right? And so that's how we started with tutoring, all of this kind of things. And I wanted to expose these young people to stuff other than what they saw in West Augustine. I wanted to expose them to STEM programs and expose them. We would rent out a van. Now we were able to buy a van, but in those days we would rent out a van and take them on college tours and take them to Jacksonville just to see Mosh, right? Teaching them swimming lessons, music, all of these kind of things, right? And teaching them the love of God, because in our camps we would start off kind of like a Bible study. The beginning of the day, like the first 2 hours would kind of be, they would go on rotations, arts and crafts and rec and all of this kind of stuff. The next half of the day, we would take them to some kind of adventure, whether it would be swimming lessons, Mosh, a STEM program, alligator farm, all of the things, trips to Atlanta, all of those things. I wanted those kids exposed so that their story could be like my story, that even if their parents weren't in certain parts of their lives, that someone investing in them could make all of the world of difference.
That's beautiful. That's so wonderful. What a great impact that people had on you, and you're turning around and having a beautiful impact on so many others. You're giving back 1,000-fold. What denomination is the Living Waters Ministry Church?
So our denomination is a non-denomination. I said we're Methodist in a sense, because I'm most influenced. I've come out of the Methodist Church, right? So I'm most influenced that way. And I believe in the whole Bible in its totality, right? So, so people will get a flavor of, we just believe in loving God's people, loving God with all of our heart, loving God's people, loving our neighbor as ourselves. And we believe, God, that we love our community, we love our city, we love the people of God, we love God, and we love ourselves. That's another thing I try to teach people. While you're loving your neighbor and while you're loving God, don't forget to love yourself too. Loving ourselves and those 6 L's, we believe, create a loving people whose lives have been changed that makes a difference.
What would you say to someone, Pastor, who's listening right now, who does not have a church home or a church family, and they just don't know where to turn? They don't have a denomination, or maybe they were brought up in a different denomination and they want to explore your church or another denomination. What advice would you give them?
The advice that I would give them, if they're thinking about a church, the first thing that I will tell them is to pray and ask God to lead and guide them into all truth and righteousness. I would ask them to pray and ask God to lead them to a loving church that would accept them for who they are, that would teach the truths of the Bible as best as they know how to, right? And then I would counsel someone to start visiting other places, right? Like when you go to a church, you've got to start somewhere. You can't, faith without works is dead. So you can pray about it. That's the first thing. The second thing is to start visiting other places. Go through a phone book, look up the web services, or the Facebook Lives usually kind of give you a taste of what an experience would be like, right, if you went to that particular church. And we recognize now that website is that front door, or that Facebook Live is actually introductory to what they would get. But you actually nail down about 10 after you're praying, you're searching 5 or 10 churches. You start visiting those churches and come with an open mind before you and find out what the vision is, how and what the people made you feel like when you came in there. Were they welcoming, right? Were they welcoming? When you went there, was the message, was it relevant? Did it speak to you? Was it biblically sound, right? And I would say go visit other churches, but go back again, right? Because there could be, I know we oftentimes, I tell our folk, people don't get a second time to make a first impression, right? I tell our folk that all the time. right? And at the same time, that one Sunday that you visited, anything could have happened. So I would say go back again, especially if you've narrowed it down, and you're considering spending more time at a church that you might be even considering joining, right? And I would say this, I would put a pitch in because we don't have a large church. And what I will say is the Bible talks about in Corinthians us being the body of Christ, and God has set members in the church as he sees fit, right? And so it could be you might go to a church that may not have we have a youth program, because I'm always going to have a youth program, and that church may not have, and we have music ministry and all of the things, but there are some things that we are missing, and you could be the person that God is sending to help that particular area so that we could be more fully whole in that area. But if the people are loving, if the word is theologically sound, right, I would start with that, and then since what God is speaking to you as you're visiting, what do you feel like when you're in the building? What are the people making you feel like? And then, and how do you see yourself becoming a part of that family? And being able to help supply that which is lacking. If you walk in and you say, this would be great if, right? So you might be the person to help supply that which is lacking.
What are some of the other programs that you offer?
We have a youth ministry. And our youth ministry, we have a social that they do once a month. We have youth Bible study, and that's a Wednesday night. On Wednesday nights, they have that Bible study that is interactive. We call it like a AY, where they have icebreakers, games. We feed them. We bus kids in, and we feed them. They do icebreakers, songs, and they have the Bible study that's definitely on their level. On that one, ages from, I think they're doing now 6 to about 17, or in a large group, and they do stuff that's relevant. So if they have arts and crafts and stuff like that, they do things that are relevant. On the Bible study, that's on their level. Then we have Sunday school, that's on their level. We have socials for them. We have a mentoring program, an in-house mentoring program, as well as a mentoring program that we do at the St. Augustine Technical High School. So the in-house is the Wednesday nights, we teach them about Jesus on their level. The mentoring program, we teach them stuff about life, right? We teach them stuff about their goals. We have a group that works with it called All Girls Rock, and then Boys to Men, about some of their goals in life, how to achieve those goals. We teach them social, how to have the social, I was about to say social distance, but social media, those kind of things, who they are. That's a big thing. A lot of the kids that come, they are in this awkward stage, who they are, what are some of the goals, how to get to those goals, how to have just self-esteem. Those kind of things are some of the things that we talk about. In those mentoring programs, we have a Boys to Men program that kind of do the same thing, but for men. Men's ministry, our women's ministry, we do have a women's ministry, and they meet quarterly. They do a book club. They do topics that have to deal with women and those kind of things for our women's ministry, our youth ministry. And then we have a music ministry. We do actually have a minister of music, and we have that usher and greeter, that kind of thing. And then we're looking at trying to have in-house a addiction ministry, right? So that's one of the things that we are working on. We have a media ministry, all of the things that people can easily plug into and become a part of. We have a hospitality ministry where that's designed people that are seeking, people that are first coming in. We make it easy for them to get plugged into the church. We make sure they are checked on, they're loved on, they're cared for, they're accounted for. That's our in-reach, right? We actually have that ministry helps if we see kids that are struggling and people that really don't have a lot of money and things like that, right? We try to minister to their needs out of that. And then with the coffee hour, whereby we just socialize. And the church itself, our church ourselves, on our calendar, we make sure that we have socials, picnics, game nights, all of the things like that. And those kind of ministries, yeah. And our outreach ministries is our Pride on the West Side. God placed on my heart a few years ago that one of the questions that I kept asking, I went to our community leaders, I went to the commissioners, all of that, and we're asking the question, because I used to watch our homeless society, and we have a program here called Dining with Dignity. And because I grew up in West Augustine, I kept asking, why doesn't anybody do anything about living in dignity, right? And so I believe the Lord placed on my heart, why don't you do something about it? And so we started 3 years ago, and that's a paint and repair. We don't do deep repair, but we do replace rotten wood, all of the things like that. And we get a crew of volunteers, anywhere from 40 to 60 volunteers come 2 to 3 times a year, and we choose a house, and the owners pick out the paint. We ask them that they have to be on site. They have to help us. We're going to help you, but you got to help us help you, right? And if we go into a house and we discover that there are children there, we try to find out, how they're doing in school. How can we help? And then if they need deeper work, we give them information about other programs that can help. But the main thing is trying to not only come and help them, but to put them in a position where they're now helping themselves and stuff like that. So that Pride on the West Side has picked up a lot of steam, and a lot of folk just love being able to come out and help. And we love the fact that we're making our neighborhood look a lot better. And one of the reasons, I know that images are important, so I didn't want the children that have to go to school walking by living in dilapidated conditions. I wanted the parents to know that there's something that they could do about their situation, that we don't have, you can do something, right? And I think since we've been doing it, it has encouraged other homeowners that they can do other things with their property. Another one of our outreaches is, again, like I told you, we're at St. Augustine Technical High School, and those kids out there are challenged a lot with low self-esteem, all of the issues and stuff. And so we go in there with a mentoring program about their goals and all of the things about what would they like to do after graduation and stuff. So we do that. And then our detention center that houses boys from 14 to 18 years old, we do mentoring with that. So those are just the various things that we do. Mm-hmm.
That is wonderful. It's so many programs and ministries offered from that one church, and I'd like to thank you on behalf of the community for all you do and all your ministry does. All this that we talked about today can be found online at the website. Now, it's a little bit difficult to remember. It's lwmministrieschurch.com. I'll say that again, lwmministrieschurch.com, and that stands for Living Waters Ministries Church.com. There's 2 M's there, lwmministrieschurch.com. So I'd like to thank you so much, Pastor Laverne March, for spending your time with me this Sunday and sharing some of the many things that your church does. I can't wait to check out your church myself. Once again, where is it located?
It is located off of State Road 1855 Prunier Road.
All right. You'll be seeing me there soon, Pastor. Thank you so much for chatting with me this morning. How do you think you'll spend the rest of your Sunday?
Well, I'll spend the rest of my Sunday, to be totally honest with you, with family, my husband. We're going to curl up on the couch. We're going to eat some good food. We're going to snack out on some popcorn, and we're going to turn on the TV and fall asleep.
That sounds like a fantastic plan. Keep in touch, please, okay?
Okay.
Thank you for listening to Good Morning St. Augustine. Remember, all of our programs can be downloaded as a podcast. Go to flaglerbroadcasting.com, click on the podcast page, and scroll down to Good Morning St. Augustine. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday in our beautiful, historic, ancient city.